Hi, everybody. My name's John. As you can see, I'm an old guy and I've been playing guitar for a long time. I know a bit about scales, but I was always mystified by modes. Couldn't quite figure out what they were and how they related to the scales I was used to, namely the kind of standard major and minor scales in Western music. But recently, thanks in part to courses I've been taking on Guitar Mastery Method, which I recommend to you if you want a really good series of intensive lessons on all aspects of guitar playing, I started to finally make the connection between what modes are and some of the things I like to play and the other scales I mentioned. So that's the purpose of this video. If you've been suffering from the same problem, namely, what the hell are modes? Why do I need to know anything about them? Why do they seem so complicated? I'm hoping I can fill in those little gaps in your guitar knowledge. This isn't a workshop or a session on how to play the modes. There's plenty of good videos on that on YouTube and elsewhere. The fingering, licks you can play with them, all good stuff. I'm not going to show you that. I'm not the world's greatest guitar player. I don't have a degree in music. This is stuff I've figured out on my own and through teaching, both one-on-one and courses I've taken. But I am an experienced teacher, so I'm hoping that will help me bring some clarity to this. And by the end of this, you should be able to understand what a mode is in relation to normal scales and also understand why modes are sequenced the way they are. And let me admit, this is all confusing. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't realize how confusing they seem to be. Even the names of them, like Phrygian, for example, or Dorian or Ionic, they sound like they got more to do with Greek architecture than they do with music. But we got to live with those names because that's what they are. So I'm going to show you standard scale. And for those of you who are visual learners, I'm going to try to do this not only by talking, but by showing you a couple of graphics. And so let me share screen here. Make this a little bigger. Move this over. Oh, look at this. It's magic, isn't it? All right. So here we go. So first of all, Western music, most of it, whether it's pop or folk or jazz or classical, uses the diatonic scale, a term I'm sure you've heard. But what does it actually mean? Well, it's a specific kind of scale. There's different scales all over not only the world, but even within Western music. But this is the most common one. So what is it? It's a 7-note scale, meaning the 8th note in the scale is the octave. So if you're playing in C and play the notes of the C major scale, the 8th note is going to be the C 1 octave higher. And not only is it a 7-note scale, but it's very specific about where the intervals go and what they are. And what an interval means is it's the pitch difference or the musical difference between two notes. So a diatonic scale has 5 whole tone intervals. On a guitar, that's 2 frets. It's like going from C to D, for example. That's a whole tone interval, pardon me. And 2 half tone intervals. A half tone is 1 fret on a guitar. It's like going from the open E string to an F. That's a half tone, also called a semitone. They mean the same thing. Not only that, but in a diatonic scale, it's specific about how these semitones are fitted into the overall structure. So there have to be 2 whole tone intervals before 1 semitone. And before the other semitone, there have to be 3 whole tone intervals. That sounds complicated, but if you look at the standard scale on the left there in this little document I put together for you, remember this: tone, tone, semitone. Semitone is the half tone. Tone, 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 semitone is the typical arrangement in the major scale, the diatonic scale system. So if you just repeat yourself, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, you can figure out the notes in any key as long as you know the note you're starting on. Like if you've never played in C sharp, well, the next note is going to be D sharp because that's one tone up from C sharp, right? So I've also added how many frets there are between each note. So to go from E, the first note, to the second F sharp, this is in the key of E, by the way, that's 2 frets or 1 tone. To go from F sharp to G sharp is 2 frets or 1 full tone. To go from G sharp to A is the 4th, is a semitone or 1 fret. So there's your standard scale. You're used to hearing it. I don't have to play it for you. I'm sure you've practiced some scales. And then on the right is an example of the Dorian mode. Now, I'm not going to show you the first mode in the sequence. They always go Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, and so on for a reason. And we'll get to what that reason is. But the Dorian is the first mode that sounds really different. The first mode, the Ionian, is exactly the same as what I just showed you. It's the usual standard scale. They call it a mode, but it's the standard scale. And interestingly enough, the Dorian mode is also the minor mode in this, the standard minor mode. So like in A minor, it goes A, B, C, that's tone, semitone, D tone, E tone, F semitone, G, A. And that's the same as what you see here. Well, how is that different from the standard scale? Here's how. Look at where the first semitone comes. In the standard scale, major scale that is, it's the third. So it's the third note you play. Root note is 1, the second, the third is where the first semitone comes. And then 3 whole tone interviews, tone, tone, tone. Final interval before the octave, the semitone is the second semitone in the sequence, right? Now, if you look at the Dorian, you see the semitones come earlier. So first interval is a tone, next interval is a semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Okay, so it's like we've moved it up in the sequence 1 step. Both semitones go up a step, but because it's a diatonic scale, it has to keep that balance of 3 tones before one semitone, 2 before the other, or vice versa. So here you've got tone, 1, that's 1 tone, first semitone, tone, 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 second semitone, and there's the remaining tone at the bottom. It'll be easy to understand when I show you the graphics, I think. Because it helps you see this visually. So here's the standard major scale in the key of E. I'm using key of E because if you're on Guitar Mastery Method and you're taking Eddie Haddad's recent and very good hour-long lesson on the Phrygian mode, all the mode lessons are in the key of E on Guitar Mastery Method. Okay, so here we go. Standard major, we'll start with E as the root note. Just ignore what it says over there, over the top of it, plus semitone for a moment. I'll get to what that means. So you move to the next note in the standard major scale. And that's why in the next space it says F sharp, which is the note, and it says plus tone, meaning it's 1 full tone from E, right, to get to the second. So E, F sharp, that's 2 frets on the guitar. That's a whole tone. Clear on that? Okay, next one. Again, it says plus tone. The note is G sharp. So to go from F sharp to G sharp, 2 frets, 1 full tone. All right, now it seems like it should be time to get to a semitone, and it is. So at the bottom of the circle, it says semitone plus semitone. So only half a tone or 1 fret on the guitar gets you to A. And now we're at the 4th in the key of E. And of course, a lot of simple rock and roll songs and blues songs go 1, first chord or first note, and then 4, in this case, A, so E, A. And then a whole tone takes us to B, which is the 5 chord. So in 3-chord rock and roll, it's very often 1, 4, 5 in terms of the chords. And the root note of each chord is on this diagram. So E, A, B. Okay, so now we go add a tone to get to B from A, add a tone to get from B to C sharp, add a tone to get to D plus. Now we're short one semitone. Here it is. It completes the key and takes you to the octave of E. All right. Now look at how different this is in the Dorian mode. Here's the root note, E. And then it's a half tone step. Sorry, full tone. I'm getting confused. So full tone step, E to F sharp. And then the next step is the semitone. F sharp and G are only a semitone apart, or one fret on the guitar. And then full tone to A, full tone to B, C sharp, another full tone, and then a semitone to get to D, and then completing it, you add a tone to get to the E. So that's why the Dorian mode sounds so different, is the semitone comes a step earlier in the progression after the first full tone interval. Clear? And by the way, the term interval is useful, and I find it's easy to understand modes if you think about the spaces, musical spaces between the notes rather than the notes themselves. The musical spaces are the interval. So is it a tone? Is it a half tone? In other scales, it might be a tone and a half, but not in these ones. It's either a tone or a semitone. So keep your mind on where are those intervals, where are the tones, where are the semitones. Once you understand that, you can play these modes in any key. I'm showing them to you in E, but you could figure out how to do it in F or in G or A, you know, anything, any key you want by making the appropriate changes to the note in each place to follow the pattern here. All right, so here we've got the standard major with the semitone coming after two full tones in the progression. Here we got the Dorian with the semitone, the first semitone that is coming after one full tone in the progression. Now the Phrygian, I'm only going to show you the three modes. The standard scale I've showed you, which is also the Ionian. The Dorian we just looked at. The Phrygian sounds really different, and here's why. Look at the pattern. So root note is E again. The first note following it is only a semitone away, F. So rather than a tone or two tones, we're getting to the semitone right after the root note. Then add a tone to G, add a tone to A, add a tone to B. Now the second semitone comes in, the C. And then another tone to D, tone to E. So again, each tone, full tone is 2 frets, each semitone is 1 fret. So do you see how this looks like the circle is kind of turning around? Here the semitone is at the bottom. That is the first one in the sequence after the root note E. Here it's moved up a notch in a counterclockwise direction. Here it's moved up another notch. So it's not at the bottom anymore. It's actually at the right-hand side. That would be east on a compass, wouldn't it, if this was north up here? This is another graphic that might help you understand these modes. So this one is actually from a Creative Commons. I didn't create this, but they give permission to use it for educational purposes. So T's and S's, tones and semitones. Think of those as little graphics, if you like. And the S's are the easiest ones to keep track of because they look different from the T's, and there aren't that many of them. So here's Ionian, or the standard mode. Here's Dorian. What do you notice? The S's have both moved over one in the sequence, and the T at the beginning kind of looped around, right? So tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Now we got tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And here's the tone that moved over from the beginning is now at the back. The Phrygian continues the sequence. Now we got a semitone right after the root note. Tone, 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 semitone, semitone, tone, tone. So do you see a pattern here? Look at those S's. They are steadily moving to the left, with each mode in the sequence. And this is why they always give them to you this in this sequence when guitar teachers are trying to explain modes to you rather than jumbling them up, because there is a logical progression. Ionian's got 2 tones at the front. Dorian's got 1. Phrygian has a semitone at the front. Lydian has 3 full tones at the front. Mixolydian has 2 at the front. Aeolian has 1 at the front, and all the other letters just follow along in the pattern. So what do these sound like? Well, I'll try to give you a quick demonstration here of the 2 modes. As I said, there are lots of classes out there and lots of good lessons on modes. So I'm not going to try to play anything fancy. I'll just try to show you the modes. So here's the Dorian mode in E. And it starts on, I guess I should stop sharing for a moment here. Starts on the 7th fret of the A string, and it goes like this. So this is Dorian mode. Sounds like a minor scale, doesn't it? In fact, as I understand it, the Dorian mode is the same as a standard minor scale. It tone to here, and then semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone. All right. And the Phrygian, which sounds Eastern by comparison because it's one we're less used to hearing, goes like this. So that semitone that starts the scale off makes it sound quite different, doesn't it? Something here in flamenco and blues and jazz and stuff like that. So I hope this helped. As I said, my purpose was not to show you all the modes and teach you how to play them. Find other lessons to do that. Is to understand the relationship between the 2 kinds of diatonic scales, the standard ones we use all the time, the major and minor, and the modes that have different, that put the intervals in different places. They're both diatonic because they both got that sequence of 2 whole tone intervals, 1 half tone, 3 whole tone intervals, 2nd half tone, but they don't necessarily start at the same place. And it's where they start, the first couple of intervals, that determine the mode and determine how different it's going to sound. So let me know if this was useful. If it was just adding to your confusion, I'm sorry, but I hope it brought some clarity to this whole mysterious issue of what these modes are.